Thank you so much, Professor Lawrence. That was enlightening. And of course, since I had already read your book, it was more. I mean, for me, it was just going through the book once again. I'm sure it must for the listeners, it must have been equally interesting. Are you there, Professor Lawrence? Because I can't see you. Because even
You can't
I
see
have
me?
technical difficulty with my video also.
How's that? Can you see me now?
I can see you. I can see you now. Yes. I thought there was some universal problem with the videos. I have problem with my video suddenly. So, in your book, Professor Lawrence, let me begin the discussion myself first because we had a small. The understanding was that you would talk and then we have a 5-10 minutes discussion with me and then we expand it to the audience. So, in your
Sure.
book, Professor Lawrence, you talk about the need for a revisionist terminology in Islam. You talk
Right.
about Muslims with a capital M and Muslims with a small m, where capital M, where a Muslim with a capital M stands for a person who follows Islam ritualistically or the theology of Islam, whereas a Muslim with a small m actually is a person who is a cultural Muslim. He may not follow Islam at all, but he exists in the culture. It could be Asian culture, or you said Indonesian, or American, or Andalusian, or whatever. So do you think that it's only Islam that needs a revisionist technology, or the Muslim themselves need to uh, re-understand kind of what the religions means for them? Because as you very beautifully argued in your book, Islam is not just the name of the religion. It's no longer the name of the religion itself, which was there in the 7th century. It is a combination of culture and uh, ethics and so many other things which Muslims imbibed in various global settings. So do you think the Muslim themselves need this revisionism, or it's just that it's just a technicality?
Oh, I think it's more than technicality. And I do think it's not only Muslims that need it, but people who are in alliance or in conversation or in comradeship with Muslims with a small m or capital M who need to have it. One of my good friends, and I think she may be on board this particular discussion, is a professor at Duke here of Hindu ethics. Her name is Leela Prasad. And Leela questioned me about the same thing you just answered, Fai. So I'm going to invoke her, just to indicate and she's not Muslim, and she comes from South Asia. She comes from India and from Hyderabad, but she is certainly not Muslim with a capital M, but she is Muslim with a small m, because she encompasses this ethic of transforming individual everyday behavior into something that really counts for humanity. And this is something which I've tried in various ways to epitomize. And when I had an earlier discussion of the same thing, and this is going to please Rajiv, he likes me to quote poetry. Someone said to me, if there is to be something that's non-Muslim, but or Muslim with a small m that can be embraced by people who may not practice the fara'id, and I don't need to explain it for people who practice them, but for people who don't, it means all the obligations it means to be a practicing Muslim. Is there anything that you would describe as one word? And I said, yes, it's no problem at all for me that one word that encompasses the distinctive element of the Islamic or Islamicate contribution to world history is adab. And adab, for me, is both an ethic and a worldview. And I quoted Ghazali in this talk, which I gave with people from the University of Chicago not too long ago. I said, for me, it's epitomized in the poem by Ghazali, which I want to give to you here, Faiz, and to the rest of your listeners. So people say, oh, you're quoting Imam Ghazali. See, here again, even before I give the quotation, I have to say I'm referring to a different Ghazali. There is not only one Ghazali, Abu Hamid Ghazali, of course, there's his brother Ahmed Ghazali, but there's another Ghazali who was Akbar's first poet laureate, Abdurrahim Ghazali. And he had this poem which begins, Birunzi Tareke Kufro Din Astadab, the Khatme Mardume Nagin Astadab. So Birunzi Tareke Kufro Din Astadab. So outside the path, and of course a play on the word tariq or tariqa, outside the path of kufr or deen, of heresy and religion is adab. So it's beyond religion. It's beyond non-religion, kufr, and it's beyond deen. Birunzi Tareke Kufro Din Astadab. But then the second part of it, which is really what I think is a capstone for humanity, for both people who are Muslim with a capital M and a small m, is The Khatme Mardume Nagin est adab. The Khatme Mardume Nagin est adab. In the Khatam and the seal of Mardum, what makes one human, the seal on that seal of humanity, the diamond is adab. So it's the idea of a ring and a gem on top of the ring. And it's a metaphor, of course, but it's saying that not just for Muslims, but for humanity. Khatame Mardumi Nagina Sadab. So I think this kind of universalism, if I can call it this kind of universalist ethic, ethos, it's both an ethic and an aesthetics. And I think one of the beauties of adab is it incorporates in Arabic the word ihsan. And so whenever I use the word ihsan, people say, oh, now you're quoting from the Quran. Well, of course, ihsan does come up in the Quran. Hal jaza al-ihsan illa ihsan, to give one quote from Surah Al-Rahman. But without going deep into the rabbit hole of Quranic quotations, I can say that ihsan is a word in Arabic. Adab is a word in Persian. There is poetry and a license, and there is commentary on both. But projecting beyond ihsan, the Arabic, and adab, which is both Arabic and Persian as a term, there is an ethos, an ethic, which is Muslim with a capital M, but also has been embraced as Muslim with a small m by people, whether they know about Islam or not, whether they come from a Muslim-dominated or Muslim majority region or not. So I do think there's a universalist tone.
Yeah.
And that is what I try to emphasize in Islamicate Cosmopolitan spirit.
Yeah, but do you think, Professor Lawrence, the Muslim community across the globe, or what you call Islam dumb, or Muslim dumb, if you can call that, would be willing or will be mentally prepared to revise the terminologies, and instead of calling themselves Muslims with a capital M, they can also think of Muslim with a small m, because now across the globe, Muslims are capitalizing their identity. In India, recently, you must have known there was a huge controversy surrounding the headscarf, the hijab. In fact, the case is going on in the High Court there, I mean, in Karnataka. And similarly, you have had a problem in France regarding the hijab and the face veil. So across the globe, you are finding Muslim societies, rather than going beyond religion, they're actually going back to theology. So do you think it's going to be easy for Muslims to adopt this revisionist terminology, not just in terms of the terms, but also in terms of the way they look at their own religion and their own lives?
So, Faith, you and I were going to have a 5 or 10 minute discussion, and
Yes,
now I'm going to take up the rest of the hour answering your question. No, I'm not. But I mean, if I tried to answer your question, it would seriously take up the whole hour. And let me just give you a brief answer. The answer is that it's not going to change the whole Muslim world. And of course, I know that this, as Huri, my friend Huri Jahan Islamolu said, who I would describe as a Muslim both with a capital M and a small m. She doesn't practice all the fara'id, but she practices the conscience and worldview of somebody who is a Muslim in her heart at a very deep level. So there always are going to be people like Huri, and there are going to be people who, on the other hand, say if a Muslim doesn't have a headscarf, she is not honoring Islam. She is not a pukka or a good Muslim. So I was in Aligarh in 2014, and they asked me to give a talk on one of my heroes, who is the translator of the Quran, not Ali, Ali's translation of the Quran. And they said, would you please, give a talk on this famous translator of the Quran? And so after I'd given it, somebody from the audience stood up and said, Ali was wrong, because you can't translate Allah as God. God and Allah are not the same. And this person gave a whole discourse on why Allah and God are not the same. And at the end of it, the person who was my host said, it's unfortunate that our esteemed Muslim colleague has decided to attack Professor Lawrence for having quoted something accurate from Ali's translation of the Quran, because Ali believed that English must be made into an Islamic language. And so I am quoting Yusuf Ali, Abdullah Yusuf Ali, when I say Islamicate. In his time, in the 1930s, the venture was to translate Allah as God. In our time, almost a century later, in 2020s, the task is to translate Islamic as Islamicate. So just as there are still people who never will accept Allah as God, there will be for the end of time, till the end of time, or at least to the end of my time on this world, and maybe beyond it, people who never accept any translation of Muslim, Islamic, small or capital letters with either one. And I think it's going to be a constant Sisyphus-like struggle, but I think the struggle must go on.
Okay. I think now let's open the discussion to the wider audience who are here. So anybody who wants to ask a question may please raise their hands or maybe just unmute themselves and start asking the question. Please go ahead.
I don't want to ask any question because I have not read Professor Bruce's book. Next time I'm going to go on to the Amazon and order a copy of his book. It, I hope, is available on Amazon, Bruce.
If it's
Your
not
book?
available, I will send you a PDF.
Okay, that will be fine.
It's
Thank
not the
you.
same as having it between two covers, but at least you will have it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I will be able to read that book at least on the PDF. Now, therefore, I won't be able to carry on a very intelligent discussion on that book, not having read it. But I suppose and I imagine that in your discourse, you have practically covered the gamut of the book completely. I hope you have done the coverage of the main thesis which you have projected in your book. Am I right in assuming that? That
Actually,
pardon?
you're wrong. You're wrong only because I said at a phase I want to do a very brief. So let me just say before you say, and I want to hear what you have to say, Musa, that I left out an entire discussion, which is really long, about why the term Persian or Persianate is not a substitute for Islam or Islamicate. So in many writings in English, and actually quite a few by Muslim writers, I could name, it doesn't matter who, Najib Kindler comes to mind from Northwestern, but there's several Muslim writers who said, we can't defend Islamicate, but we can defend Persianate. Persian is the language and the culture of Iran. It's not just the nation state of Iran, but this whole wide band of a Persian-speaking realm. Now, from my viewpoint, that is not a correct. So I have a long section of my book, which I not included in the summary, defending Islamicate, not just against Islamic and Muslim, but against Persianate, which I excluded.
Thank you, Bruce. In fact, responding to what my friend Faiz just now mentioned about the problems which the Muslim community is facing, especially in India and perhaps in the other surrounding countries, the fact does remain that Muslims all over the world, including the USA, Canada, South America, UK, France, they are all waking up to this concept of Islamicate, which you have just now mentioned. I gave an example that I am writing currently a book on halal and haram in Islam. Now, I have been doing some research on that subject, and I find that many books have been written in Arabic on that subject. And since I know a little bit of Arabic, I'm able to do my research. But the fact I learned was that today, the halal industry in Europe especially is of the order of something like $18 billion. It has grown from $6-7 billion 10 years ago. Now it has reached 18, and projections are that in the next 10 years, it may cross $25-30 billion. Now that shows that Muslims, and I don't know whether it's all Muslims who are contributing to this $18 billion industry, or there are non-Muslims who are part of the Islamicate concept, who are also contributing to this concept of halal, because the advantage of halal is being projected by not only Muslims but non-Muslims. I have been reading some books by non-Muslims, particularly the educated elite in Europe, in America, and so on, who believe that starting from the Jewish concept of kosher and Muslim concept of halal, both are becoming relevant even for the non-Muslims. Therefore, this point which you made, that whether you like it or not, Islam is influencing the world in some way or the other. This is one point which I thought I should mention. Maybe you will be able to throw some light on that. The second point is referring to what you stated. I noticed that I don't know whether this is happening in America, because I have not been to America for the last 5-6 years. But I noticed that nowadays many Muslims in India don't say Khuda Hafiz, because the word Khuda is a Persian word. Therefore, they don't say that Khuda is equal to Allah. So they always will say Allah Hafiz. When they are leaving you or they are going away, they will say Allah Hafiz, not Khuda Hafiz. We used to say, when I was brought up in a particular milieu, where we never heard this expression Allah Hafiz. We always said Khuda Hafiz. And even today, I automatically say Khuda Hafiz rather than Allah Hafiz. But I noticed that my brother, my daughters, everybody is saying Allah Hafiz, Allah Hafiz, Allah Hafiz. So this means that Islam is taking over mentally. Brother Faiz referred to the hijab controversy. Though this is a very small number of girls, younger girls particularly, who are spearheading the hijab movement. The older generation gave up hijab long back. They did not follow the concept of hijab. They also gave up the so-called Islamic dress, and they were adopting whatever dress was going around in the countries in which they were living, except perhaps in America and Europe. I don't know what is happening in America and Europe, whether Muslim women are sticking to their old traditional dress, or they are taking over to frock and off-the-shoulder dress and so on and so forth, which is quite common in
perhaps we can ask Mr. Professor Lawrence to respond to that, right?
Yeah, I will. I'm putting the issues which are uppermost in my mind. Maybe he will be able to respond to it. So, is there a movement going around where Islam conceptually, culturally is taking over all over the globe? Thank you.
So, you know, there's so much that you said and so much that's interesting. And let me just say on the halal haram controversy, or the business that's around halal and haram products, that I know much more about riba than I know about halal haram. And I thought maybe you were going to go and mention riba, because there's now, especially with Bitcoin, I hadn't even mentioned the whole business about Bitcoin and cyber currency, but there's now this whole idea that riba is really has to be revived and applied across economic lines in non-Muslim as well as Muslim circumstances, because it's the only way that one can regulate the Bitcoin industry, which is going to, not in my lifetime, but in my children and grandchildren's lifetime, is going to take over much of our economic exchange. So I think that the halal haram controversy and how it plays out in terms of the food industry in Europe, I can't say much about, but riba and its decreasing interest of non-Muslims in riba as a way of attacking problems in Bitcoin, I think, and counter currency is going to come up in our lifetime. On the Allah Hafiz, I have many friends who are South Asians who have objected to the fact that now in the younger generation, it's a generational thing for many of my friends, that parents are seeing their students come back from school, and instead of saying Khuda Hafiz, saying Allah Hafiz. It's become almost a generational marking that when you are now a proud young Muslim, you say Allah Hafiz instead of Khuda Hafiz. But I think that this will change if one recognizes that it's not simply a way of affirming Allah, but a way of dethroning Khuda. It's a way of saying that the Persian influence, or what I described earlier, the Persianate influence in Islam, has become so dominant that among South Asian Muslims, who are the dominant group in many cultures of Western Europe and North America, Khuda is a much more ready and, of course, historically sanctioned use of saying hello and goodbye, or goodbye when you said hello to somebody, as assalamu alaikum, and then when you say goodbye, instead of anything you say, instead of ma'asalama, you say Khuda. So that, I think, is one explanation of generational shift, which I don't think is going to last forever. And the dress code, I think, also is something which is debated. I couldn't answer this emphatically, except to say that there are people who, for a variety of reasons, again, as in the case of Allah, is to bolster an identity which they feel is under assault. And so in the same way in which Allah Hafiz has become a marker of greeting and commending people when you say goodbye, the hijab has been a way of sort of illustrating who you are in public as a devout Muslim. And I don't think I should, and I often say to friends of mine who are women, Muslim women who are both veiled and unveiled, it's not a matter of whether your head is veiled or unveiled, it's your heart. So you can veil your head, but as long as your heart is open and you're receptive to other people and mindful of the world, I myself don't have any problem with Muslim women who decide they want to embrace the hijab.
I think this is what Marshall Hodgson called the Arabist bias, Professor Lawrence, right?
Yes, you're right. The Arabist bias, which says if it's not Arab, it's not Muslim, or if it's not Arab, it can't be Muslim.
That's right. So any other person would like to ask a question or a comment?
I would
Yes,
like to say something.
Yes, please, please go ahead.
First of all, I would like to thank Professor Bruce B. Lawrence for writing such a wonderful book. I had to say this when I wrote after reading this book, when I was reading. One thing is very crucial, like throughout this in my studies, that I must say that the teaching of Professor Bruce has brought a lot of changes in my life. Even the whole idea of Islamicate and this term, I found very interesting. And then I thought of, like, I think that actually attracted me to learn more about Professor Bruce Lawrence. Who is he? And I think I have watched all of his videos and lectures. And then I thought of, like, to initiate a project that is I included in Umran Academic Research Association. And this project is actually, we have dedicated this whole project to Professor Bruce, and we are hoping to give a scholarship to students who will be working with us. Professor Bruce Lawrence, he started with this, the spirit, the cosmopolitan spirit. I want to make some comments, because I recently submitted my proposal, PhD thesis proposal to Professor Bruce Lawrence before he was supposed to start his lecture today. He mentioned about Marshall Hodgson. It is really the venture of Islam. You know, I was reading this book of Ghazali, My Beloved Son, and then I realized that the Islam, which is actually the Ikra, and which is actually ilm be amal. So the venture of Islam is not just this venture, the quest, but actually it's, I found very interesting, it's Ikra. He started reading his own quest, that is ilm and amal, and that what Professor Bruce Lawrence had said, like he was a very virtuous person. So even while I'm privileged to have a personal connection with Professor Bruce Lawrence, I do not find any contradiction in his ilm and amal. So this was the reason that I thought to dedicate my project to Professor Bruce Lawrence, and I never shared with him. The beautiful line that I like in this book, I would like to read, and then I want to go back to the cosmopolitan spirit, and he adds 3 words, that is Islamicate, cosmopolitan spirit, 3 words together, uses, not only the cosmopolitan spirit. So he says, without belonging, there could not be the longing to make the world the larger, indeed, the largest place of belonging. So this was something different, which I found, to talking about Islamicate, and I found very interesting about that. It is there with the term, in Sanskrit term we call Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The whole world is our family. So Professor Bruce Lawrence, he starts with the Islamicate Cosmopolitan, that what Sahab Ahmad has projected in before 13th century. Start from the 13th century, perhaps, but Professor Bruce Lawrence start from the 500. But I found, and I proposed this thesis to, and there are a lot of things that I have mentioned. The Islamicate, the cosmopolitan spirit existed in a very rudimentary form at the dawn of humanity. From Umran Badawi to Umran Hadari, Ibn Khaldun have recognized it. Maybe this was in the Ibn Khaldun or Sabiya that he thought, and then developing as a Umran Hadari as a complex civilization. And perhaps there was the immature form. Bruce Lawrence discusses the cosmopolitan spirits in his book Islamicate Cosmopolitan. However, he speaks in 3 words: Islamicate Cosmopolitan spirit. Why doesn't he just talk about the cosmopolitan spirit? I will look for this answer in my thesis. So this whole teaching of Professor Bruce Lawrence, I found that opens the door for many scholars who are non-Muslim to learn more about Islam, what is Islam, and to connect. I found myself learning this whole manifesto, that there are a lot of things to understand here, which goes beyond the boundary of Islam. And that is what he says, Islamicate, a Muslim with M or Muslim with a big M and a small m. That I found that to imagine Indic civilization, that is Indic civilization or darshan, which is not restricted to the geographical location, what we call Indian subcontinent, but it goes beyond. And that's why I use this term Barzakh exemplar. So Barzakh exemplar, I say that this is the term that Professor Bruce Lawrence has used, and he uses in his book the ICS, Islamicate Cosmopolitan Spirit. So this was the quest again of the Marcel Hudson and perhaps Professor Bruce Lawrence, and it was long back of the Mansur al-Hallaj. So I call it Barzakh exemplar. So this is what I have been understanding reading the Professor Bruce book Islamicate Cosmopolitan. And thank you very much for. I have sent my proposal, and I have so many questions, and I hope that Professor Bruce Lawrence will look into it and give a feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think there's another gentleman called A.R. Raza who has raised his hand. Mr. Raza can unmute himself and ask.
Where is he?
I'm sorry for this. I missed this point before no one is opening the mic. So I was saying this Indic darshan or Indic civilization. When I was imagining the Indic civilization, I thought of like a Indic Islamicate as an expansion of Indic civilization. So this was my claim, and Professor Bruce Lawrence, maybe how he reacts on this, I will be wondering.
Thank you.
Yes, I agree.
Is Mr. Raza there, or maybe we can go to Khuratunayan Ali? I think that was the next person.
Meaning of this. What is it?
Okay, thank you, sir. Okay.
Yeah,
This is
Khuratunayan, please
Khuratunayan.
go ahead.
Yes, okay. Thank you,
Please,
sir. Thank
please
you.
introduce yourself and identify
Okay.
yourself.
Okay, sir. Okay. Thank you so much for such, very thoughtful lecture and discussion. I'm Quratul Anali. I'm teaching in social work department, Legal Muslim University in social work department. I have nothing much to say, but I just have to talk about a little about the Khuda Hafiz and then this Allah Hafiz. That once I got this, my submission just because of this, just a little information I just have added here. It's not only the Khuda Hafiz has been, derived as the Khuda is derived from the, it's a Persian term. That's why we are, now we are using the Allah Hafiz but actually what I came across from someone that Allah is the name of Allah actually, and the rest are the sifat of Allah. So that's why once you say Allah Hafiz, that means the Allah with all his sifat protects you. That is what I got once explanation regarding this Allah Hafiz in spite of in the place of Khuda Hafiz. This is just I have to give in. Okay, thank you so much.
Any other person would like to ask? Mr. Raza, is he back? Or if not, somebody else.
So while waiting for somebody else to come on, can I just answer and say that
Yeah.
one of the reasons that I object to Allah Hafiz being always interspersed and substituted for Khuda Hafiz is not that it's just Persian over Arabic. It's also making Allah itself into a kind of form of what some people in Southeast Asia have called a quasi form of idolatry. So in my book, towards the end of my book, when I'm dealing with the whole question of how does one think of Islam in Southeast Asia, Islam in Africa, and I mentioned this remarkable performance scholar named Ada Amani, who is both Muslim and Hindu in her background. She's a Muslim by her father, and her mother is Hindu. There's a picture of her on page 74 of my book, smashing an Allah plate. And the reason why I included, somebody said, "Oh, but that's heresy to smash the Allah plate." And her answer is it's more heresy to worship the name Allah instead of the practice of Islam. So if Allah becomes itself a fixation rather than a name or as somebody else once said to me, there's only one name that actually encompasses God. It's not Allah, it's Al-Ghaib. That finally all names we have as human beings, including Allah, are human. They're constructs. And you say, well, but this is revealed, the name Allah was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad. Of course, but it came through a human mediary. And even in the very first surah of the Quran, it's recognized that Allah, like all the Asma al-Husna, of which there are at least 99, but I would argue there are over 200 actually. In the Holy Quran itself, there are more than 200 names given to Allah, Allah Ta'ala. So in one sense, the only accurate name for the beyond is not Allah, but Al-Ghaib. So there is the whole idea of what is the knowledge that we have, and what is the knowledge that we try and share. Every time one uses language, was in the paradox, even the name Allah is not itself a total expansion, inclusion of everything that is Al-Ghaib. So the only real name for the beyond is beyond language itself, and that is Al-Ghaib.
Is Mr. Raza back, or maybe we should go to somebody else now? Any other person would like to ask a question? Perhaps you must give a chance to another lady. Okay, since nobody is asking a question, maybe can I ask you another question, Professor Lawrence?
Sure.
Do you think that since you wanted to go beyond religion, the
Before you
Islamicate...
opened your mouth, I wanted to say something. You stopped me.
Yeah, let me ask this, and after that, Musara Sahab, please. No,
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. I give the podium to you.
Yeah. No, what I wanted to ask was, Islamicate encompasses something much larger than Islam itself. We want than the religion of Islam itself. It has to go beyond religion, obviously, and I entirely agree with you on this, Professor Lawrence. So therefore, my question is, Do you think Islam was a religion at all? Or was it a social movement?
I think it was more than a social movement and more than a religion and more than a culture. I think Islam is what I would call a life force. I have trouble. I think I used this at one point in my book. I can't remember whether it's in the actual material in the context of the book or in the footnotes of the book, but I use the term life force. So you're always, anytime one uses a single phrase or a single word, I think the word religion is very circumscribed. And so when Hodgson back in the 1960s was trying to say Islamicate is something that goes beyond religion and includes culture, he didn't mean secular. And I think the problem, the word that's not been used yet, and I'll use it because other people have it in mind, is Hodgson was fighting the idea, and I think we all fight the idea, that when you say it's not religious, the only two options either is superstitious or is secular, the two S's. And the reason I use the word barzakh and barzakh logic, of course, in the Holy Quran, barzakh can refer both to the world beyond and to this world. And it's used in both realms, but it can also refer to two kinds of water, salt water. I won't go into Quranic. The word barzakh, of course, itself is not Arabic, it's Persian. So one of the things that's magnificent about the Arabic Quran is it includes our words that are not Arabic. And among the crucial words for me is not the different idiosyncratic Assyrian and Syriac words that you can trace in the Arabic Quran, but the word barzakh, which is clearly Persian, and it means two different forms that elide but do not eliminate. They elide but do not eliminate the other. And so when we come to this question of Islamic, is it religion or culture? The answer is it's both religion and culture and more. So by barzakh logic, Islam cannot be either religion or culture. It can be both religion and culture, but it's also more than religion or culture. And so it's for lack of any other phrase in English, I would say instead of defining Islam as religion or culture or society or secular religious, Islam contains a surplus of meaning, an added element of meaning that one cannot reduce to a single word. So if one had to have a single word for Islam, it would not be civilization, it would not be cosmopolitan, it would not be spirit, it would be life force, a force for life in this world and a force for life in the world beyond. But that's the closest I can come to something in English that encompasses multiple meanings. It's not religion, it's not culture, it's not society, it's not secular or spiritual, it's beyond all the qualifiers, but it is something definable, and it's definable as life force.
Absolutely. Life force surplus, wonderful. Entirely agree with. In fact, you in your book, you quote Lutfi Zadeh, the founder of fuzzy logic, to say there's a lot of gray area between binaries.
Yes, and I think I'm really indebted to Lutfi Zadeh for this notion of fuzzy logic. And for those of you wondering how I came to the term barzakh logic, it was through fuzzy logic, thinking, is there something beyond fuzzy logic? Fuzzy means black and white, gray. And barzakh logic means it's both black and white and not only gray. So in one sense, barzakh logic goes beyond fuzzy logic. It uses fuzzy logic. And I'm the first one to say I would never have come to barzakh logic without Razi Zadeh if I had not read his interpretation and this wonderful. People don't know him. I discussed the first cover, and I describe him as Islamicate Cosmopolitan exemplar because he has such an amazing way. Lutfi said he has such an amazing way of talking scientifically and philosophically about linguistic variables. He was a linguistic theorist, but also a physicist, so he understood the forces of nature as well as language, and that's what it takes to produce fuzzy logic.
Yes, and that was long back in 1975 that you wrote that. That's great.
Yeah, I mean, in 1965, he wrote his first The World is Gray, Not Black and White in 1965. So he was actually even earlier than Hodgson.
Yes. Is any more questions? Musara Sahab, you wanted to say something?
continue on that subject that in the 7th century, we had Imam Abu Hanifa, the founder, eponymous founder of one of the 4 madhahibs of the Sunni world. Today, I'm told that 2/3 of the Muslims of the world follow Abu Hanifa's system of madhab. And now he was of Persian origin, and people went to him, particularly Persians. They asked Abu Hanifa that we are not able to pronounce many of the Arabic letters, like Ra, for example. So we are doing it as Raza, not Raza. We can't pronounce, Ihdina Sirat Ha, and so on. Is it permissible for us to recite the Quran in the Persian language when we are performing our ritual prayers? Abu Hanifa quoted a verse from in the Quran itself, which says, Inna haza lafi suhfil ula, suhfi Ibrahim wa Musa, meaning that this was very much there in the earlier books, the books of Abraham and Moses. Therefore, Abraham and Moses, Ibrahim and Musa, they were not writing in Arabic. They were writing in whatever language Musa wrote in Hebrew. Abraham probably
Nabatean.
Something like that. Therefore, the Quran was there in the language of Abraham and the language of Moses. Therefore, you are entitled to recite your ritual prayers in the Persian language, provided your translation is authentic and it is absolutely correct. He gave this verdict long back in the 7th century. However, the Islamicate world of that time did not accept his interpretation, not even the Hanafis. His own students like Abu Yusuf and Shaybani differed from him. And all the other 3 imams of the founders of the other 3 religions, and including Imam Abu Yusuf, who is also the real founder of Hanafism, they all said, no, we will not accept this translation because Arabic is the language in which Quran has been revealed. Therefore, it has to be recited only in the Arabic language. If you do not do it, the Islamic world, Islamicate world, will get divided into small pieces all over the world. This was their fear. And is a result of that fear that they oppose this concept of reciting the Quran in the Persian language. Now, what do you say about that, this Islamicate concept? Was it what prevented them from accepting?
So, in deference to your question, which is so, but I'm aware of the fact that we have a limited time, so I thought I'd just pull a book off my shelf and just put it on the cover here. It's called The Vernacular Quran. The Vernacular Quran, and it's by a scholar named Travis Zadeh, Travis, and is that we talked about Lutfi Zadeh? This is Travis Zadeh. This is the son of Travis. And he shows how the vernacular Quran, how the Quran was recited in Persian from as early as the 7th century, and that all the arguments about whether it can be recited perfectly or not ignore the fact that many hadiths say you have to be able to appreciate God's word in your own tongue, in your own language, in your own culture. And so there is counter to this idea that the Arabic would divide, not knowing Arabic would divide it. If you know only Arabic, it divides it. So this is the book, which I think is the answer. It's unfortunately, it's a very long book. It's over 600 pages, but it makes the case compellingly that there was, first of all, in the whole of the Persian-speaking world, including, by the way, Imam Ghazali. I quoted from Ghazali, who was the poor laureate of Akbar, but Imam Ghazali, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, he wrote books in Arabic but Arabic was his second language. Persian was his first. So when he wrote the Ihya Ulum ad-Din, which everybody knows, not many people have read, but everybody knows the Ihya Ulum ad-Din of Imam Ghazali. He also said, to understand it, to make it clear, I'm going to write the Kimya-i Sa'adat, the alchemy of happiness, in Persian. So the Mukhtasar, the summary, the gist of everything that Imam Ghazali wanted to say in 8 volumes, he did in 1 volume in Persian. So there's a sense in which the knowledge of Islam and the practice of Islam was furthered in Persian by people who spoke both Arabic and Persian. So when Hodgson, to get back to Hodgson, when he says there is not one canonical, but 2 canonical languages in Arabic, in Islam, one is Arabic and one is Persian. He talks about Perso-Arabic or Indo-Persian, because there's a sense in which Persian in India and Persian in the Arab world becomes the second voice of Islam. It's not less because it's second, it reinforces the importance of Arabic. So to dichotomize and say, oh, if you have a bad pronunciation because you're not a native Arabic speaker. One of my very good friends from California is an American Muslim who is a Hafiz al-Quran. He's a Hafiz al-Quran because he's memorized the whole Quran of Abdullah Yusuf Ali in English. Does that make him a lesser Muslim? I don't think so. I think that, again, I come back to this idea, it's not the veil in your face, it's the veil in your heart. The veil over your heart says there can only be a good Muslim who recites the Quran in Arabic. Then I think Islam is a much bigger world.
Very, very interesting, Professor Lawrence. In fact, my friend Jose Abraham has a question. Jose, would you like to ask it yourself rather than me reading it?
Yeah, thank you, Faiz,
ahead,
for
Jose.
this opportunity.
Please introduce yourself, Jose, please.
Oh, okay. I am Jose Abraham. I teach Islamic studies at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. So I have 2 questions from your presentation, Professor Lawrence. One is actually how this concept of Islamicate, especially since you defined Islamicate as a life force, how it interact with other life forces, like Rajiv was actually talking about Vasudeva Kudumam, that is also a life force. So how do we understand the engagement of these different life forces from different traditions and cultures? That's my first question. Second one is, I am also fascinated with Talal Asad's idea that Islam is a discursive tradition. So I'm just wondering how these 2 ideas are similar or different. That means Islam, the concept of Islam or Islamicate, and also Islam as a discursive tradition. So is there any way in which we can understand these 2 concepts within a framework? So those are the 2 questions I thought of asking. Thank you.
So Jose, I got your second question very clearly, but could you say it again? What was your first question? It seemed to kind of float.
My first question is, there is no, I don't have any question about the definition of the word Islamicate, but I'm wondering how different the worlds engage with each other. That means Islamicate as a life force, but then we also have actually other life forces or other cultures, maybe cultures defined or motivated by Hinduism, or cultures motivated by Christianity or Judaism, how these different life forces actually engage with each other. Do we have actually a framework to understand this engagement that we can actually see in different places?
Well, first of all, let me just say, I really appreciate your being part of this discussion coming from Fuller Seminary, because I know I don't have anybody who's currently a friend who's either a student or teacher there, although I now consider you a friend because you've come online for this discussion. But I know in Fuller Seminary, there is the life force that is marked as Christian that has to be taught, and everybody who's there is, or at least most people I know who've been at Fuller have been very committed to the Christian life force and the Christian way of thinking. And I myself also have a background in an affiliation with the Christian tradition. So there's a sense in which I'm not saying that the Islamic force is the exclusive or the best or the only one that can have a universal appeal and audience and impact. But I am saying, as somebody who has devoted my whole life to not only studying Islam, but being in the Muslim world and continually engaging with people who are Muslim at many levels with a small m and a capital M. So I think that the Islam life force does not exclude or eliminate the Hindu or the Jewish. You didn't mention Jewish, but I would also say there's definitely a Jewish. And I would also say, by the way, that there is a Parsi and Sikh or Siddharji, and also a Taoist and Confucian. But I would also say there's a agnostic and atheistic life force. So there are even life forces that, to quote somebody, you sometimes have to go beyond theology to describe contradictions. So I use Barzakh logic to say two contradictions can stand side by side without canceling each other. But I also quote the poetry of Wallace Stevens, where he says in one of his poems, "What flyers fall. We believe beyond belief, without belief." So my answer is that whatever you believe, you have to be beyond that belief to encompass other belief. And in some sense, you have to even be atheist without belief to confirm that belief is larger than yourself. So it's a package, if you will, of contradiction, but it expresses to me the life force that's present in all religion and non-religion. So that's why I don't like to use the term religion exclusively and prefer, if you will, the term life force to describe Islam and Islamicate. Where I really I hope that makes some sense to you. We believe beyond belief, without belief. But I also think that while I admire, and he's been a dear friend for, oh my gosh, 40 years. I've known Talal Asad. And I have to say, the only problem where Talal and I have had disagreement has been how we interpret his father, Muhammad Asad. Muhammad Asad, who's done a marvelous translation of the Quran, which I have often myself used and said to other people, even though I disagree with the theology of some of the things that he says in the discursive part of it, in the apparatus, the footnote apparatus, I think that the translation of the Holy Quran that has been done by Talal Asad's father, Muhammad Asad, is really itself a marvel of spiritual, intellectual achievement. But where I guess I side more with the father, with Muhammad Asad, than Talal Asad, is I think Islam is more than a discursive tradition. I think it's also a performative tradition. And I don't know whether you recently saw this article in Critical Studies, but Talal did a thing on rethinking religion through Wittgenstein. And I did a response to that where I praised many of the things that he did, Talal, because as I said, I admire him and I've known him for a long time. But where I disagree with him was he keeps coming back at discourse, and the discursive tradition is applied to the individual. And from my viewpoint, you cannot talk about the individual without talking about the collective. You can't talk about ihsan, to use Arabic, without talking about maslaha, the common good or the collective good. So even though I appreciate, applaud, and myself use some of the insights of Talal Asad, where I differ from him and where I side more with his father, Muhammad Asad, is to think that religion, or the larger spiritual quest, if I can call it that, the life force that's often named or labeled religion, that where that life force is really important is in a collective, not merely in an individual or single disposition.
Thank you.
That's simply
Thank you
amazing
for
once
that
again.
question.
I think my friend Habib Sahib has also actually thanked us for this discussion. I thought perhaps if he has a question, he must unmute himself and ask, because he himself has a lot to contribute. Habib Bhai, are you there?
I'm very much there.
Yes, please go ahead.
I think today's the thing blew all the cobwebs away from my mind. I'm not a very learned person, and I'm more involved in community work and things like that. So this defining Islam in this way is in all encompassing, because I've had many famous jurists, lawyers as friends here in India who say it's not an inclusive faith. It's an exclusive faith. And all that you have said today, Professor, is that it's not so. It's as inclusive as anything else and includes everything else. And that particular we believe beyond belief, without belief is simply mind-blowing. And thank you to Musa Raza Sahab also, who's somebody I look up to for years. I think he was also brilliant. Today's was a very enlightening discussion. I wish, if it's possible, Faiz, if you could have a recording of this, because I'd like to share it with a few thinkers also.
Yeah, this is being recorded, of course, and it will be put up on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I'll also share you the specific video of this, and also send you the link of our channel. There are so many other videos. There are scores of videos, including many other scholars. I think Professor Lawrence also has another video of, I think we have one more video of his on our YouTube channels.
And if I can't get it on Amazon, that if I can,
I will pass on the PDF to you. Yes. With Professor Lawrence's permission, can I pass on your PDF to him, Professor Lawrence?
I will make a serious attempt to buy it on Amazon.
Yes, in India it's not available at the moment.
I give Faiz permission to pass it on to whomever he wishes. And Habib, since you use that wonderful image about clearing away the cobwebs, let me just say that even those of us, and it includes myself, who are supposed to be clearing cobwebs and thinking beyond cobwebs, I really had not myself fully understood the implications, and I probably will never fully understand the implications of what is meant by Islamicate. And I got a note from an Iranian architect named Nasir Ardalan. Nadir Ardalan wrote me and said, I want to talk to you about things. For those of you who don't know him, he's somebody who's an Iranian who teaches at MIT and is a very famous architect. And he said, when I read your Barzakh logic, I think Rajiv will like this. He said, I was really reminded of the Danish philosopher Piet Hein. Now, I'd heard of the Danish philosopher Piet Hein, but I thought he was a poet. It turns out that most poets have to be philosophers, or if they're really good philosophers, they should also be poets. So this Danish philosopher Piet Hein, who died in 1996, had this wonderful idea of what he called the super circle, SUPERCIRKEL. Super circle, which combines the circle and the square so that it's both at once, and it's neither one nor the other. It's both at the same time, and it exceeds them at the same time. And he said, I didn't know what the super circle was till I read your book, and now I realize it's a case of Barzakh logic. So that cleared away a cobweb from my mind, is that I didn't know how you could ever depict something called Barzakh logic. I could imagine talking about it. I could imagine putting it in poetry, or I could imagine trying to put it in action, but I couldn't think of how to visualize it. So super circle of Piet Hein, to me, is the closest I've seen, and I didn't see this until last week. So even those of us who think about and try and get on the borders of the boundaries of the imagination, we also have our cobwebs that others clear away for us.
Great.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Wonderful. Any other questions? I think a lot of people here, and I think they're a bit hesitant to ask. I can see Dawood Miakha, another friend who's here. I can see one Usman Ahmed. If they have any questions, perhaps you can quickly ask. There's also a lady whom I see here. Forsoon, sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that name.
Yes, it is correct.
Is it a Turkish name or what name?
Yes, Turkish name. Name. I'm Turkish.
Okay.
But I don't have a question.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Okay. You are just a good listener. So you listen to, I
yes.
mean, as I say, poor listener seldom hears a good sermon. So you have a collection of a lot of good sermons with you, I'm sure. Unlike us. So
Faiz, I think we've exhausted people's patience, maybe, because we've gone for an hour and a half.
Yes, I think we should
so
call
maybe,
it a day then.
Maybe we've done enough of Barzakh logic and fuzzy logic, and the boundaries of Islamic imagination for one day.
Yes, I think let's not go beyond this boundary now. And it's
But
been a
you've done a wonderful
fascinating.
job of exploring the boundaries.
No, I must thank you for the book. In fact, I'm still waiting for that Wiley's hard copy. Are they sending it to Professor Lawrence?
Well, they said they needed that particular information, which you didn't want to provide. So the woman said, they couldn't do it, but somehow I hope
Maybe,
you'll get a copy.
yeah, maybe they can change the courier company. That's it. Because I have been getting a lot of books without people asking for the personal details. That's what I thought. Anyway, if you could arrange it, that would be wonderful.
feel free
Because I have already spoken to your newspaper to send a review of your books, because this is a wonderful book. The audiences in India must know about it. So I want to do a detailed review of your book. I was fascinated by it, Professor Lawrence, believe me. Not just the Bazak logic part of it, but the whole idea of three terms that you separately explore: Islamicate, Cosmopolitan, and Spirit. Because you said why you avoided cosmopolitanism, and those explanations are wonderful. Especially Cohen you quote, and the points that you quote on Cohen. These are all, I mean, it needs further exploration, of course. Wonderfully written, I must say.
Well, thank you,
So,
Pace. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, so I think we have come to the end of this wonderful discussion, and I personally thank Professor Lawrence for accepting my request to be part of this discussion, to speak to us. He has given us more than 90 minutes. I think it's almost 2 hours. He came at 7, it's 8:40 now. So had there been questions, I'm sure he would have gone on. So it's actually the lack of questions that because of which we are closing now. Otherwise, it's been a fascinating discussion, and so kind of you, Professor Lawrence, for being here. And I look forward to many more such manifestos, if you want to call them that, as a manifesto. Of course, we need many more such manifestos exploring and actually letting Muslims know that there is a world beyond theology, because Islam has been reduced to a theology at the moment. So we have to go beyond and explore the life force that it is. So thank you so much once again. And I would like to inform the participants that we have many more such programs coming up, inshallah, shortly. If you can briefly give your email IDs, we will keep you informed of our programs, and also we will send you the links to, or maybe you can even add you to our mailing list. If those who prefer to give their email IDs, you can just put it in the chat box there, and we will let you know. And so, Professor Lawrence, you have any final words to say before you say goodbye to us today?
Well, my final thought is to say that I'm humbled by the curiosity and the goodwill of all who participated in it. Again, I want to thank you, Faith, for having done this, and also to see many good friends whom I've seen before, and others whom I'm meeting for the first time, and my current student, Rajiv Kumar from Bihar and from Istanbul, but also Reza Musa, who's now left, but I really enjoyed seeing him again. And I felt as if I'd come to India without leaving North Carolina, which is a very good feeling.
Yes. In fact, we look forward to
you.
receiving you in India soon enough, inshallah. Maybe do make another trip. And maybe can I request Rajiv also to give his email ID? I'll keep him posted, and we could be in touch. Yes, please put your email IDs.
Thank you very much. Yes, I have shared with you my email ID, and
yes,
I think we are also planning to organize review seminars. Like, we students are going to read the book.
Wonderful.
And we are writing a review. Maybe we can have together a program on that.
Why not?
Still, we are in a process, and this is my research work also. So
wonderful.
So yeah, we can work on that together.
Certainly, we'll love to be part of it anytime. You can just write to us. And like, can you just record all those emails that are there, and can you save the chat? Right? Are you there?
Yes, first.
It is done. Please save those email IDs so that we could be in touch with them. So
yeah, it is already done.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We should end this with a greeting of Khuda Hafiz.
Yes, let's say Khuda Hafiz. let's be defined about Khuda Hafiz. Yes, Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz.
Assalamu alaikum to everybody.
Alaikum salam.